We can't be a nation and allow some other country to take us to war. Let me give an example of how it could happen, and the most likely trigger, if you like, to a conflict, which ultimately involves China and America. Now, there's an argument over the islands in the East China Sea, Sendaku Daioh Islands, which Japan took by force from China in 1895. Last time he was in Japan, President Obama extended America's nuclear defense of Japan to cover those islands, where before he had said he's neutral in relation to ownership of the islands, but it should be decided peacefully. He should have said that he extends, obviously, America's commitment to defend Japan, but the price of this is recognizing there is a dispute with China and getting Japan to commit either to negotiations with China or international negotiation, arbitration. Well, he did neither. He just said the defense guarantee includes those islands. Now take the next chapter, and even Hugh White, without spelling out detail, has said that Japan's the most likely trigger for a conflict. And if Japan's in a shooting situation, America is immediately involved. And let's say militarist, nationalist, Prime Minister Abe, so I'm sick of Chinese vessels going into our waters, close to our islands, her aircraft buzzing those islands, tells his pilots to shoot down a couple of Chinese aircraft next time around. China's going to react one way or another. Does she drop paratroops on those islands? Does President Obama say, well, don't worry, we'll use our task force in Darwin to take them back? We're right in the middle of it. We're right in the middle of it. And with the facilities at Pine Gap, with the use of forces out of Darwin, how could we possibly say we are not involved, we're standing aside? You know, this, some people might say it's fantasy, but Hugh White has written that Japan is the most likely trigger. If that gets pulled, America's involved, and because of our relationship with America, however unwilling we are to be involved in a conflict in the Northwest Pacific, we would be involved. And that is what, you know, looking 5, 10, 15 years ahead, that's what we have to avoid. And the only way we can avoid it is by re-establishing Australia's strategic independence, the integrity of this nation as Australia, and not as an appendage of America.
How do we actually extricate ourselves?
Well, some of it will be quite easy. Major General Burr, you could pull out of American forces, other people embedded in, if they're in positions that would lead to a conflict of interest on our part, you could pull them out. You could pull our frigate out of any service with USS Washington. Those things are easy, and they wouldn't annoy the Americans too much. They'd wonder what we're at after past years of wanting to snuggle up closer and closer to Uncle Sam. The task force in Darwin, you could say, sorry mate, you're going to have to put it somewhere else. But the Americans could find somewhere else to put it, and you could give them 6 months, 12 months to do that. Pine Gap would be much more problematic and much more difficult because it's a very sophisticated facility. It would probably take some years to replicate somewhere else. And I think out of respect to past relationships, we should say, well, you know, we'll give you 4 or 5 years to replicate that. But at the same time, I would say, if we're talking about now, early October, I'd say I'm going to pull all the Australians out of Pine Gap before Christmas. So it will be seen to be an American control base, albeit on Australian soil. But we are not going to be complicit in some of the purposes for which Pine Gap can or could or would be used by the United States. And that, I think, would send a very clear message that we weren't part of it. So you just have to disentangle this. Now, the Americans, strangely enough, If Australia, who has been regarded really as not an independent voice in relation to strategic matters because of this relationship, if we took actions of this kind, it might cause people in America, look, what have we done? How have we alienated Australia? What's happened? And to really question their own policies in sensible and effective ways. On the other hand, America could be very annoyed and try and make us pay for our, what they would call, errant behaviour. Well, an Australian government would need to try to minimise that, but we should pay the price of our own independence.